Chapter 2. The Primal Connection. 1. Coeval with life. Salt in the first herbage. Peel back the layers of the earth. Strip away the cities, the forests, the silence of the modern world. What remains is a planet that was raw, wet, and drenched in salt. In this ancient dawn, salt was not a footnote in the story of life. It was the ink in which that story was written. Salt did not arrive after life began. It was there from the very start. For eons, life existed only in the ocean. Every living thing, every tiny flickering cell was born in water thick with mineral salt. The sea was the cradle, and the salt was the lullaby. But then, something changed. The first plants began to move, slowly, painfully, crawling out of the waves and onto the bare, sun-scorched rocks of the young land. Fragile mosses, pioneering ferns, the very first green things on Earth. This was the first great migration, and it should have been impossible. The land was dry, the sun was brutal, the wind would have stripped these early plants of every drop of moisture they carried. So they solved the problem in the most elegant way imaginable. They carried the ocean with them. These first plants drew sodium and chlorine from the mineral-rich soil. They wove it into their tissues. They circulated it through their primitive stems like blood through veins. Every leaf, every stalk, every blade of ancient grass was a tiny, living reservoir of salt. The world's first food was already seasoned, not by a cook, not by a hand, but by the earth itself. Every plant that would ever grow, every creature that would ever eat inherited this ancient chemistry. The salt was there in the very first bite, a hidden spark of electricity that powered the cells of the first forests. We carry that inheritance today. Our hunger for salt is not a modern habit, it is a biological memory, an echo of the first green leaf that decided, against all odds, to bring the sea onto land. 2. The wisdom of the beast, following the salt licks. Long before the first human drew a map, another kind of intelligence was already shaping the land. Not with tools, not with language, with hunger. Across the wild reaches of North America, Africa, and the steppes of Asia, great herds were on the move: buffalo, elk, deer, mountain goats, and they were all heading to the same place, the salt lick. For these animals, salt is not a luxury, it is a matter of survival. A deer grazes on grass all day. That grass is rich in one mineral, potassium, but dangerously low in another, sodium. Over time, the imbalance becomes unbearable. A dull ache settles into the body, the muscles weaken, the blood thins. And so the animal follows something deeper than instinct, a pull, a compass built into the bones. It leads them to the lick. A salt lick is a patch of earth where salt seeps naturally to the surface. It might be a spring, a crusted rock, a stretch of mud stained white with ancient mineral. These sites became the cathedrals of the wilderness. And here, something remarkable happened. The usual rules were suspended. Predator and prey gathered in the same clearing, the lion and the zebra, side by side, all of them desperate, all of them licking the same white dust from the ground. Some of the most famous licks tell a darker story. In what is now Kentucky, there is a place called Big Bone Lick. The name is no accident. Mammoths came here, mastodons, giant ground sloths, creatures the size of small buildings. They came in such numbers that the earth beneath them was trampled flat, the mud turned thick and treacherous, and many of them never left. Drawn by the salt, driven by the craving, they sank, slowly, silently into the swampy brine. Their bones settled into the mud, layer after layer, a mountain of skeletons built by nothing more than thirst. But the animals left something else behind, something far more useful: paths. Wide, clear, efficient trails carved by millions of hooves over millions of years. They cut through mountains. They followed the easiest routes across valleys. They were highways, engineered by the collective weight of generations. When the first human pioneers arrived in the New World, They found these trails already waiting. The legendary buffalo trace, stretching for hundreds of miles, was simply an animal road, a highway to the salt wells of the interior. Humans did not discover the salt. They followed the beasts who already knew where it was.
3. From raw flesh to the cookpot, a dietary shift. There was a time when humans did not need to search for salt at all. It was already in the food. The early hunters of the Paleolithic era ate meat, raw, bloody, and rich with mineral life. The flesh of a bison, the organs of a wild boar, the fluids of the kill, all of it was loaded with sodium. The body took what it needed, quietly, naturally. Salt was invisible, automatic, built into the meal. And then fire changed everything. When meat is cooked, something happens to it at a cellular level. The heat squeezes the tissue, the moisture is driven out, and with that moisture, the salt goes too. Roasted meat, boiled stew, baked bread, all of it suddenly emptied of the one mineral the body desperately needed. For the first time in human history, the food on the plate was missing something vital. But fire was only the first act. The second came with farming. As tribes settled down and began to grow crops, the diet shifted. Wheat, rice, maize, these grains fed the world, but they were chemically incomplete. High in potassium, almost empty of sodium. A farmer living on porridge and bread slowly, quietly began to starve. Not for calories, not for warmth, for salt. The muscles cramped under the heat of the field. The blood grew thin. The body sent signals of hunger that no amount of food could satisfy. It was at this precise moment that salt became something new. Not just a nutrient, a commodity. The cookpot had drained the salt from the food. Now crystals had to be thrown back in, by hand, on purpose. Salt had to be found, collected, guarded, and traded. This was the true birth of the salt trade. The transition from raw to cooked did more than change our recipes. It rewrote our relationship with the earth. We became a species that had to chase a mineral, a hunger that would eventually build empires, trigger wars, and carve the great trade routes of the ancient world. The dining table became the new frontier, and the salt cellar its most important monument. 4. Paleolithic discovery, licking the stone. Picture a small group of hunters, their bodies lean, their eyes sharp, moving through a prehistoric valley at the edge of dusk. They have been following a trail, not of prey, but of hooves, a wide, worn path pressed deep into the earth by generations of animals heading somewhere with purpose. The trail leads them to a hillside. Tucked into a crack in the rock, a quiet, glistening outcrop, white and crusty, blooming from the stone like frost on a winter window. The hunters watch from the shadows. A great stag steps forward. It does not graze, it does not drink, it simply presses its tongue against the white crust on the rock face and holds it there. The animal's eyes half close, its body trembles just slightly, a ripple of deep, quiet relief. It stays like that for a long time. When the stag finally lifts its head and moves away, one of the hunters steps out, slowly, carefully. He reaches the stone, runs his fingers across the strange, cold rime, crumbles a small piece loose. He brings it to his lips. What did that first taste feel like? A flash, sharp and electric. Not quite a flavor, more like a jolt, like biting into lightning. It was the taste of the blood, the taste of the sea, the taste of something the body had been waiting for without ever knowing it. In that single moment, a white stone became a treasure. Word spread. Tribes returned to these stones again and again. They learned to read the land for signs of salt. The way the soil crumbled near a brine spring, the white bloom inside a cave, the way morning dew clung longer to certain rocks than others. Licking the stone became a ritual, a shared act, a way to sharpen the body before the hunt. These early humans were the world's first mineral hunters. They mapped the earth's hidden veins, not with tools, but with their tongues. The white crystal had passed from the beast to the human hand, and from that moment, nothing would ever be quite the same. 5. Early traces, evidence from the cavemen of Belgium. To find the oldest proof of salt in human hands, we must go underground, into the deep limestone caves of northern Europe, into Belgium, into the cold, damp dark where the air smells of ancient stone and old smoke. Here, archaeologists have found something extraordinary. Not just bones, not just tools, salt. In the caves of the Meuse Valley, around ancient hearths where fires burned thousands of years ago, layers of saline residue have been found in the earth, traces of salt deliberately gathered, deliberately used. These cave dwellers lived on the edge of a retreating ice sheet. The winters were brutal, the summers short, and meat, when they caught it, spoiled fast. A successful hunt could provide enough food for weeks, but in the damp, cool air of the cave, that meat would rot within days. The invisible bacteria would move in, silently, hungrily, and the feast would become poison. But the evidence suggests these early humans found a way to stop it. They took the white crystals from nearby salt springs and they rubbed them into the flesh. What happened next was a kind of miracle. The salt drew the moisture out of the meat. It pulled it deep into the fibers and held it there. And in that dry, mineral-rich environment, the rot could not survive. The meat lasted. Days became weeks, weeks became months. The cave dwellers had not just preserved food, they had preserved the future. To store salted meat was to plan ahead, to survive a winter when the hunt might fail. It was the first time humans looked beyond today and prepared for tomorrow. Salt had moved from the tongue to the mind. It was no longer just something to taste, it was a strategy. The Belgian caves tell us that by this point in history, salt had become the first true technology of the kitchen, the bridge between the raw, immediate world of the animal and the calculated, stored world of the human. These cavemen were not just hunters, they were the world's first curators of life, using the earth's quiet, white gift to make sure the fire of their tribes would never go out.